Hey, welcome to my root cellar. Isn't it beautiful? No, it's not beautiful. It's horrible. But a big part of storing up food for winter and having a root cellar or a cold storage is learning to manage that space, which I have obviously grievously failed at. So I thought, why not just take the entire world through this disaster zone, show you what's still good, how we weed out what's kind of past its prime, and kind of just how we generally manage the space.
Before we dive into life in the cottage, I'd love to extend a heartfelt thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Not only does Squarespace support creatives like me who make a video for a living, but they also make it easy and possible for other creatives or anyone looking to start a website to get their message out into the world, just like I have used their service for Homemaker Chic podcast. Squarespace makes it easy to connect social media accounts and automatically push out website content. Visit squarespace.com/Elliott Homestead for a free trial and to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain.
So the last time we walked you through the root cellar, things were full and vibrant and beautiful. And now here we are, kind of mid to late winter. And that's not really the case anymore. But that doesn't mean that everything is lost. It just means we have to learn to use it and to cook with it and to manage it in a different way. I have a helper today, right? All right. So first on the list is getting rid of something that's quite stinky in this space right now. And that is this basket of shallots. So shallots are a great crop to store over the winter, but these shallots actually were harvested last summer. And so I've been using them to make stocks and broths throughout the winter, but now they're just really past their prime. Obviously, being a year and a half old. And I find I'm just reaching for the newer shallots. And so I'm just going to go ahead and toss these in the compost pile, get them out of here, and give them thanks for the many soups that they could have made. All right, so Juju, this is going to be our compost box, okay? So let's dump this in there. Yeah, some of the shallots just kind of dry out and dehydrate into nothing. Some of them just kind of get soft and squishy. So if you feel them, they just feel like paper. So if you have an onion or shallot that feels like that, just toss it into the compost pile. You guys, this is such a horrible mess. All right, next up is the garlic that's laying all over the floor because an unnamed child of mine dumped the entire basket of it yesterday. But I thought, you know, it's not all lost because we can then go through and check the heads. So again, give them a nice squeeze. And if they feel nice and firm, they're good to keep. If there's any squish to them whatsoever, toss them into the compost pile. This is, no, that's okay. This is music garlic, and this is the garlic that we grow for storage. It's a hard neck garlic. So Juju, can you grab all the garlic that feels nice and hard and just toss it into the basket? You be in charge of that?
Yep.
Next up on the list is checking through all of the storage onions. Again, a super major crop for anybody who's going to be keeping things through the winter. These were harvested in July, and for the most part, they still look great. But what will inevitably happen this time of year is you'll start to get some onions that start to want to grow again. And so the greens will poke out. But again, you could use this onion for broth or for stock. So just move it up to your kitchen, keep it at your right hand when you need it. Or you can also just cut this top off, toss the onion into the compost pile, and use this just like you would. Oh, you found another one. Use this just like you would green onions or scallions in a dish. I'm actually going to be making a chicken and rice dish tonight, and this will be perfect. So I'm going to break off any that I see, put them up in the kitchen. That's kind of a small one. Toss the onions into the compost pile. So basically what you're trying to do when you manage your onions is just toss any paper, which they inevitably kind of drop their skin a little bit, pull them out, wipe them up. How do you feel? How do you look? Any molds, any softness? Just toss those ones. They'll get really stinky. And so sometimes I just move things to a new basket. I touch each one, look at it, make sure it's still good, because you really don't want a bunch of rotting food in your root cellar. That's not the point. And frankly, that's not going to make you want to cook from this space. So Juju, can you keep going on this garlic?
Yeah.
And I will sort through the onions. Let's keep going. Let's get all the garlics picked up. All right, so these are the last of our storage potatoes, and I was really disappointed with our harvest last year. So the fact that we have any left, I suppose, is still a good thing. But I'm hoping for a much better crop this year. But you can see this is inevitable too. If you're doing storage potatoes, is they're going to want to sprout. And you can prohibit some of this by keeping them in the dark like it is down here in the root cellar. But this is just the nature of a potato, and they keep them from doing this in the store by putting something on them to keep them from sprouting. And so in a way, this is a good sign. This is a homegrown natural potato that still is running through the regular course of things. You'll hear different opinions on this, but a lot of people through the ages have kept their own sprouted potatoes and used them as potato seeds. The challenge with this is that potatoes tend to develop disease over time. And so you do need to be careful. I usually buy in fresh potato seed every year. And then if we have any gaps, or I just have a few that really want to grow, I'll pop them into the garden as well. So you can see some of these will get really long. Now, once a potato, oops, I pulled those off. Once a potato starts to sprout, all is not lost. You can just pop these off with your fingers, and they're still good to eat so long as they're still kind of firm. If you let it sprout for too long, though, basically it'll take the energy from the potato, and the potato will get kind of soft and squishy. So, I mean, use your discretion on this. If you'd eat it, so be it. These squishy ones are fine, like ground up, put in a hash or made into hash browns or that kind of a thing. So just keep the ones that you would want to eat. And I don't bother going through the whole bin of these and picking off all the sprouts. Every week, I just take a small basket up to the kitchen and pop all the sprouts off and then store them up there. One of the things I always have to take stock of when I come down to the root cellar, especially when I'm doing a clean like this and getting everything sorted, is my cheeses. We had some major cheese disasters this year because I made a bunch of beautiful cheeses and they worked out great, but then I coated them in beeswax and that really affected the flavor of the cheese. So those ones are actually in my cheese cave, and I'm going to have to pull them out, and it's going to make me very sad because that represents so many gallons of milk and so many hours of work that it's kind of depressing to even think about. But all was not lost because we discovered pretty quickly that the beeswax was affecting the flavor of the cheese. And so we made a bunch of cheese that we've been storing down here that has no coating on it whatsoever. So this is a natural rind Gouda. And the only thing that this has on it is a little bit of lard. And so what you can see here, there's a little bit of mold growth, which is fine. It's just on the surface. So these need to be wiped down with a brine every so often when you first make them, like once or twice a week. And then, every so often afterwards, just to keep the mold in check. And then I also rotate them back and forth. They're like little babies. You need to take care of them. So I've got a big shelf of cheese here that I need to just give the once over with a nice salt brine, rotate, and then put the cover back on and let them rest. Our root cellar is still far from being finished. So we have made our space work for right now, but eventually we would love to actually have built-in shelves here and utilize all the wall space that right now is not being utilized. One of the things that we hope to move out of the root cellar eventually is my little grow rack here. So this is where I keep my little seedlings in the springtime, and it works well. But right now it's sort of doubling as a junk shelf. This second room is really kind of just a mess. But that's okay because it's still way better than it was when we moved in. We're making progress. But you can see I have used this shelf to store my squash. And since we're just a few weeks away from getting some of our seeds started, I really need to sort of go through these and get this cleaned off finally. just inevitably as we do projects throughout the winter, you know, things filter down here that need to be taken care of. You can see some of the squash. So a bunch of these little squash were just the last minute ones I pulled off the vines. They weren't fully ripe, so they didn't cure properly. And if you eat them straight away, it's fine, but they just don't store as long as those beautiful ripe ones that you get off the vines. And so there's some of these I need to filter out. How does that look? Appetizing? I know this is really worse than showing you my underwear drawer. This is terrible. But basically, as I'm sorting through, I just ask myself, would I eat that? Would I want to eat that if I came down here? Because I will always cook what looks best. And that's a no-go. So some of these still look in great condition. And, some don't. So this is just part of storing food, is going through and sorting it, getting rid of what no longer looks good. The walk-in cold room where I'm standing now is one of the very hardest places for me to manage in the winter because there's so much food coming and going out of here all the time. But inevitably, a couple times throughout the season, we just need to take stock and pull jars forward and throw away anything that doesn't look quite right. We've been eating off all of our ferments here all winter, and they all look great. One of the questions I actually get a lot is, well, these ones don't really have it, but we made barrel pickles on our channel earlier this summer, and sometimes you'll get a little bit of mold or a little bit of film. Actually, I know where I have some. Let me show you. Check this out. Now, I know that this is going to freak a lot of people out, but this is totally normal because all this is organic matter that's meeting oxygen. But if you dig down into there, you will find, oops, as I drop it, a bunch of just totally normal, beautiful pickles. So I'm going to leave that up to your discretion. What amount of mold you're comfortable with. Mold doesn't bother me. Mold is a natural good thing that comes on a lot of foods. And so something like that, when I'm ready to eat those barrel pickles, I'll just scoop all of it off, maybe move it to a fresh jar, and then put it up in the fridge in the kitchen. And that way we can have easy access to it. But don't let it freak you out if your pickles do that. Let's take a look at our beets and carrots. So you can see we still have 3 tubs of beets, which is great. This time of year, I tend to start juicing them. It's a really good way to sort of eat through the rest of them. Your body's sort of ready for some really raw, fresh food anyway. And so I use a lot of my beets up that way this time of year. But if you just dig down through, you can see that these beets, they are hard as anything. So these store very, very well in the cold room. If you leave them on the surface, like I did this one, it'll get a lot softer and squishy. But the ones that are under the soil, they stay really nice and hard. Okay, so those look great. This was one of my carrot bins, and I think it's completely empty. So all that's left now is the little bit of dirt that we stored the carrots in. I'll make sure to tag a video below on how I store my carrots. So what we can do with this is just go dump it in the garden, use the soil for the next round of growing, and that served its purpose well. I've got a bin of carrots back here that I've been sort of picking through. I think we have about 1.5 bins left is all, which is great. I'm glad to use up what we grow. You can see that they're still really nice and hard and firm. That might be the only carrot left in here. Oh, here's just a couple more. So it would be worth it for me to go through and consolidate, because if you can keep things organized and clean, that's always helpful when you're cooking. Although do as I say and not as I do right now, because this is kind of a hot mess in here. Only 1 bin left. All right, here's another kind of freaky point for a lot of people. And I mean, really, I just want you to know this is totally normal. I don't want you to be so freaked out about things like mold or, gross leaves. Every cabbage that you buy in the store would look like this, unless the produce manager or the supplier didn't take the time to go through and just peel away some of those outer leaves. I mean, this is just as it goes. The cabbage is old now. This cabbage was harvested in August or September, I think. I think it was August. And so it's been out of the ground for a very long time. As time goes on in the root cellar, essentially the cabbage is shrinking in. It's going to die slowly, leaf by leaf by leaf by leaf. And so this one actually got a little damaged by earwig. Not all of this is mold, but see this here, this comes from an earwig. So I just cut that off when I use it, or I just eat it. I really don't care. But just peel those outer layers back. I mean, some of these can look pretty nasty, but once you peel them and once you cut them open, they're totally fine. Look at this little baby cabbage. And that is perfectly good to use. And so I don't really bother peeling back the cabbages at all unless I'm going to use one. So they're in here and they look moldy, and that's the way that it goes in the root cellar. As you're cleaning through your root cellar and going through and organizing it, it's also just a great time to take mental notes and say, hey, we need to eat some more salsa. Or, hey, we still have a bunch of pickled beets, or we still have a bunch of jarred tomatoes that we need to get through, because that will sort of help you set the menu in the coming weeks if your goal is to eat through all of this food that you've put up.